Yep, you got to start on time, otherwise you don't get reliable visitors.
Yeah, people don't come.
Yeah.
That's like organizing whole Woodstock and that. So what if the bands don't show up?
Yeah, actually, that's got to be a very good question, hasn't it? I'd be terrified of organizing something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, here we are, where I'm Spin Legal episode number 60, and it is April the 2nd, 2025. So you didn't get fooled by any April Fool's jokes yesterday, did you?
Nope.
No,
Well, I
good.
think it was somebody who was trying to write something in there about how all of a sudden everybody has become transparent and they all wanted to do certain things and be right by certain people. And then he says, April Fools. He almost got me for a moment.
Well, yeah, but you should have seen where they turned off the water going down Niagara Falls
Oh, yes.
for the annual spring cleaning. Okay, so welcome to Spin Legal. It's April 2nd, 2025. This is episode number 60, and with Angela there and me here. So Peter here. So Angela Browne and Peter Giblett, and we're partners at Invictus Legal LLP. And tonight our topic is customer confidentiality or client confidentiality and privacy. Okay, so there we go. And what we are going to be talking, so this is really our part 2 of a topic we were talking about last week. So there we go. Client confidentiality and privacy. Since Angela's being very picky on the word client.
Yes.
So if you need to contact us, you can do so at 905-688-5598 or email Angela at weareinvictus.legal or myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal. And of course, as you might have guessed, our website is weareinvictus.legal. There you go. Okay, so client confidentiality, privacy, and privacy, particularly digital privacy, are all important in the modern world, and we'll show you how.
Yeah. Right? This is sort of a part 2 of what we discussed last week. We discussed last week about client confidentiality, privilege, and what exceptions there would be to client confidentiality, and how it is important to maintain confidentiality, particularly if you're working at one firm and then you move to the next. Okay, but today we're going to be focusing on digital. What's in your computer? What's in your email? What's in your sticks? How you carry about, and what some of the rules are, and how to protect. Like whose data is it? Yeah, whose data is it? Okay? Yeah. Particularly, like sometimes people work for a company and then they take all their stuff with them and they move. Can't do that.
Yeah,
can't do that. If it belongs to the company or belongs to the clients of the company.
And there are some pretty big ones of these out there, so you can get quite a lot on them, right?
Oh, yes.
You can get terabytes on some of them, right? But you don't have the right to take them away.
No.
So here's a question. So you're coming to your, not necessarily our firm, but any firm in particular. And the question is on your mind, must be on your mind, is you're a customer of a law firm, and the question is, how do lawyers and paralegals use your data? It's a fair question. It really is.
We use your data to put together your legal action or to do your negotiations. Okay, so we have the facts in there. So it helps us establish that. And usually before we go forward, we send you a copy of what we send to the other side so you can confirm that we have the facts correct and in the right order and that sort of thing, because you want to make sure that everything works.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a file that might look like this, and the whole point about this file is that they are there because we're working on your particular file, so it's a bundle of information that is about your particular case, and the point about that is that we have access to certain pieces of data. Some of that data is very confidential, and we would only use it because where we need to for your case.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
And then this goes into the data, and then we also keep, as Peter was showing you, that's a physical file, but there should be a backup file on electronic. Okay, so we keep a cloud where we keep all backup files.
Yeah.
Okay, and everything we get.
I tend to look at it the other way around. I tend to look at it as the electronic is the master of everything.
Yeah.
However, there are times when people have come in the door, they've just given you a whole bundle of stuff, and that hasn't been scanned onto the system yet.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they have a file this thick, and they want us to go through it.
You had a box about this.
What I'm supposed to do. You can't. So these things could be very difficult to handle.
And one of the things about it is, so a customer comes into my office, and they shouldn't be able to see this file, the name that's written on the file anywhere. I might need to know the name that's written on the file in order that I know that I'm going to be working on George's work, right? Mm-hmm. But you, Mary, coming into my office, shouldn't know that George even exists.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to arrange it so that if a client is coming into your office, that your other files are moved away from you.
Yeah.
So that they're not anywhere where a client could just take a peek and see who's there and who else you've worked with or who you're going to work with next or whatever. You'd have to make sure it's careful. I've worked with somebody like that before. They had all their files up on their desk, and I attempted to make it clean and put everything into each file that belonged to each file, which was relatively easy. It was pretty clear. But unfortunately, he freaked out at me because if I did that and it was successful in putting it where they should be, then he would lose everything. He would not know where anything was. But whatever it is, find yourself a way to organize so that you know where everything is, but at the same time, don't have all your confidential client information on your desk in front of your client.
Yeah. Okay, so then there's a question about what data do lawyers and paralegals use of yours? Right. So
we have to get when we first start with you, we have to do an identification and a verification.
Yeah.
Which means we have to get a driver's license, review it. Does it look like you? And to confirm, and then do a verification. And does it match what we have?
We also have to do verifications like, where do you get your income from?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that is a crucial kind of information, and we're required to by the Law Society Act to actually maintain a record of that stuff.
Yeah, we have to do that because most of the time, are you employed anywhere? And if a person's not employed but they seem to be making money, then you could say, well, I'm living on a pension.
Yeah.
Okay. And or I took an early retirement and I get OMERS, or whatever. Okay. Or they got savings or something like that. So there's a number of things that people could live on, and that's the kind of thing we need to know. It's not that we really care how much you have in your savings account, how much you get in a year. All I mostly worried about, like unless I'm doing an employment case for you, I need to know a bit about your salary and what severance was offered and that sort of thing. But if in a normal case you come in and we talk about it,
you're being evicted by your landlord or something. We're not going to ask you about your
exactly. I don't really care whether you made $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year.
Yeah, and exactly. So I had a client.
But you just tell me this is okay. I work at such and such, right? Or I'm not employed right now, but I'm living on my savings, or
Yeah.
or I have just recently retired from such and such a place.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, there was a landlord and tenant board client that I had that had run her own business, and she was quite wealthy. Right?
Yeah.
Why she would? And it's not mine to reason. Ask the question why, but I was curious in my mind as to why she didn't, buy her own place, because she had the money to. But again, that's for her to know, and not me, not to speculate, right?
Yeah. And many times people
You-
do rent for a reason because of the flexibility of location.
yeah.
Okay.
And we don't, and the thing is about that is that we don't ask about such things
Yeah.
because
Unless they
outside,
volunteer to tell us.
yeah.
And sometimes when we talk about a person who is in danger of being evicted, like an N12 situation or something, we ask them, I said, is there anything special about your place why you might not want to leave it?
Yeah, it's 3 doors down from my workplace.
Yep. Things like that,
Yeah.
Or my mother is just beside me, is right across the street from me, and I look after her during the day, So there could be many different reasons. So those are kinds of things that we ask, and it's helpful for us to make an argument for you. We don't like that type of thing we do, and other information we do take a copy of one of your IDs, a picture of ID that government would give you, with driver's license most common, but there's also photo card or passport. Hey, and I'm sure other people, I think somebody brought in their firearms license one time. Hey, so that happens. Hey, so I mean, these are things that identify people and that are verified by the government about who that
Yeah.
person is.
And just to note, because your health card is not a valid piece of ID, right?
Yeah, because
your health
they
card
don't have your
does not
picture
have
on it
your
or your
address on it.
address.
No, it's because it doesn't have an address on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Your health card, everybody should now, nobody should have the old-fashioned red health cards. They should all be gone because they were terminated in about 2020.
yeah.
Right, so no old health cards. They should all be the new green style health cards with a photo picture on it. Now, but that said, what it doesn't do is validate your address, because there is no address data on the health card.
Yeah. And the only time you would have to do that is if you have another piece of ID that might validate your address. Might have your name on it with an address on it.
Yeah.
Like say maybe official letter to you, like say from CRA or from your employer, or somebody who is official, to send it to your address.
So the CRA has written to you at 15 Maple Crescent, and now you're bringing your health card, which shows that you are who you say you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that stuff is also something we keep confidential, even though this may not be pertinent to your case. You may not be kicked out of 15 Maple, but we do need to know that is where you are staying, that is your residence, and we keep that on file. There's a lot of reasons for that. Like, for example, if somebody came back, your name is Bert Jones, and somebody comes back in a few years from now and says, I'm going to sue Bert Jones. Okay, I need to know a little bit about the Bert Jones you're suing. And it turns out the Bert Jones that visited me was 25 years old, and the Bert Jones you're suing is 70 years old. Okay, so it's a different Bert Jones.
Yeah.
So these things we have to have in our database. That protects you because, first of all, it keeps a confidentiality and also prevents conflicts.
And it was interesting you just said about a Bert Jones. I had a situation like that where the lady said, so I said, who's the opposing party? And she said Bert Jones, just to use the same example. And so I quickly looked up in our database, and so can you tell me something about Bert Jones? Do you have any identification information about him? She says, yeah, I happen to have his driver's license number. So I looked him up on our system because I'd already seen the record that we have a Bert Jones there. And she reads off his driving license number. So it's J 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. Yeah, that happens to be his driving license number. I'm sorry, I can't help you. right? So it's important, those kind of things, because I said we used to, I can't tell you how, but we did a case for a Burt Jones, and sorry, we can't help you.
Yeah, all I could say is I don't say that we did a case for Burt Jones. I always say I'm sorry, but I'm in a conflict.
Yeah,
You
that's
can't
what I meant.
disclose why you're in a conflict, but you're in a conflict.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I meant to say.
So that information there is forever kept by us so that we know, and that in the future I cannot bring somebody into my office who is going to sue you as a client, because you as a client have been to us at Exchange Confidentiality. There could be some reasons where we could possibly do it, but say if it has nothing to do with the traffic ticket, that you're being sued for, and someone else is handling it, and I don't get to see it. Sometimes that happens, but very, very rare.
Yeah, I suppose if a person came in because they had a traffic ticket 15 years ago, that might be excusable.
Yeah, but we don't deal with it. And if it's Peter that handled the traffic ticket, we're not going to have Peter handle your case.
Yeah.
Okay, it becomes somebody else gets to handle your case. So.
Well, you, for example, in that regard about privacy and that sort of thing, confidentiality, etc., there was a certain case whereby you were opposing a certain gentleman, and a few years after you opposed that particular individual, he came marching into our office and said, "Hey, can you represent me? You did a fantastic job against me." Right?
You could do that.
Right.
And that's not a conflict, because in your original time when you went against them, you did not have confidential information.
Yeah.
Okay?
And
but now he's coming into the office. Now he wants you to represent him.
Yeah.
Okay?
And besides which,
this is like a new client.
Yeah. And besides which, the chances of coming up against that individual that you were representing in the past is probably nil. Because, for example, if you went up as an employer-employee situation, and you were representing the employee, and this was the employer that was coming to you, well, the chances are that employee is never going to work for that employer again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, as long as it's not tagged to that employee.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So if I'm representing Jack Lee and he works for ABC Limited, but ABC Limited comes in and they're being sued by another company, maybe a supplier, okay, and has nothing to do with Jack Lee. Okay?
Yeah.
But if the employer is being sued by Jack Lee, I can't represent the employer, nor could I represent Jack Lee, nor can I represent the employer against Jack Lee if the employer, for some reason, needs to go after Jack Lee.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is one of the reasons why we have such data, because how am I going to know that we have represented Jack Lee in the past, right? Because I can't, hey, where's that mic? Where's that eyeglass? I got an eyeglass around here. Here we go. Woo. Can I look into Angela's brain?
Nope.
With the eyeglass, it isn't going to help me, is it? And it's certainly not if Angela's out of the office for 3 days. Hey, I don't know what's in Angela's mind, so I say, hey, we're going to go and represent, Joey Smith against Jack Lee. Go, how dare you? You can't do that.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason why we take all these details, like your driver's license, your date of birth, and your employment. Employment is sometimes important too, because Jack Lee always worked in the construction field. Okay? But maybe the Jack Lee that they're suing was an IT guy.
Yeah.
Right? And he works at Google.
Unlikely to be the same person, realistically.
Yeah.
Different set of skills. And both vital to our community, but actually the IT guy is probably not the construction person.
So it gives us kind of a clue about things. So that's why there's a lot of information asked and why people have to do these things. And then the next thing too, in terms of other information we use, you tell us your story.
Yeah.
Okay? And we put it down the way you give us your documentation, we put it through. It's better to give us what you have, and then we go sort it out. And if there's something else we need, we ask you. And then we put the documents together that we need. And then we start proposing to either write a letter, start a claim, start an application, whatever it is that we're doing. And then after we're finished, then we return that application to you so you can see it, just to make sure that what we're doing is correct, okay? That the dates are correct, order of things, the people involved were correct, and that we're not missing anything. So these things are very important when we do this sort of stuff. And then as we go along, and then we go through the case, and then hopefully we can settle it. Like I use different things, that I know within the case to help settle the case or to put the case forward to trial. And this is the kind of thing that we do. That none of this stuff ever leaves the office. We cannot give your stuff to anybody else.
Okay.
Only people who have access.
Yeah. We've come to so we've come to an important question here in relation to that. So who has access to a client's personal data?
We have staff, associates, the partners. Okay. We keep a cloud which everybody has access to who can sign in, who is licensed. They're all licensed. Okay. Unless there's somebody who's under confidentiality and is under supervision by one of us, such as a law clerk or a law clerk student can access the data, but they're always under supervision. They do not take anything with them when they leave. Everything here stays here. Okay? Yep. But they help us do what we need to do for you.
Yeah.
Okay? So they have access to your data. If a staff person leaves, they are not allowed to take your data with them.
Yeah.
They cannot put their data on a personal computer.
And that applies to even if they had actually written a letter for you and they're kind of, hey, doesn't bother me that I wrote the letter for Jack Jones. I want the letter because I need to know, I want to use it in the future for a template. You can't do it.
Can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Okay. Sometimes you can ask the firm is, can I use a template? But it won't be about the Jack Jones letter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
these types of things. Because the reason is that say you leave the firm, whether it's on good terms, bad terms, doesn't matter. Okay. Like you can't go the night before you leave and then start emailing all these documents, all these claims to yourself, and then now you have access to them on your own computer at home. You can't, because now you're no longer with the firm. You're in possession of data that is confidential, that has nothing to do.
But again, if you were planning on leaving the law firm that you were working for a month beforehand and you started moving the files, copying files home, again, that would be against the law as well.
That's against your law society obligations.
It's against your law society
obligations. Okay, and there could be some complaints. There's PIPEDA, there's Electronic Document Privacy Act. There is different things like that because the data doesn't belong to you. When you work, for the firm, sometimes you want to complete something at home. We have a cloud. You have access to the cloud when we're doing it, and you can just sign into the cloud and then you can access it, and then you could say, okay, now I'm doing this, and then you can make whatever amendments, that kind of thing, and then you send it in to us. And it has to be sent to us on our workplace email, because everybody is given a workplace email that goes onto our servers.
Okay. So that should hopefully that should set you, if you're a customer, client, it should give you some comfort that in fact nobody just walks around with your data. There's no file lying open on the desk. They're confidential, and only the people who need to see the files can look inside the files, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And that need-to-know issue is probably preeminent within here, because I do as a partner because I can, because I need to know about all the files in the firm, especially since my role is about managing files. But generally speaking, one associate isn't looking at other associates' work.
Yep.
Right?
I need to know about each of the files, but I don't I don't micromanage. Everybody thinks that when you're a managing partner of a firm that you know about all the files, all of the issues that come in. I don't.
Yeah.
I won't tell you if they paid.
You don't know that Charles has just agreed to do something for his client, for Mary.
But eventually comes in, that because we do have regular meetings with their associates just to know how that's going. And then they have to put it on the cloud. So I will go home. Sometimes I will go onto the cloud, and sometimes I'll see, okay, how's this going? Because we expect these things to be uploaded to the cloud and have regular updates.
But again, if the client just 10 minutes before Charles left, if the client just made an agreement with Charles about getting something done, you wouldn't have a clue.
I wouldn't know at that time.
You'd never know about that.
A couple of days later or so.
Yeah, exactly. Charles might come in a couple of days later and say, hey, Angela, I just worked with my client and we arranged this. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Right? There's a lot of communications where somebody would come up to us, either Peter or me or both of us, and kind of say, I'm having some difficulty with this. Can you please review my Schedule A for this? Or this client seems to have this issue, and I've got a kind of a case with this sort of thing. What would the torts be referred to in this? Am I addressing this correctly? We work with people, and then that person goes back and they revise it. All of our associates are trained in the law, so they know how to put these things together, and they have templates that they could use here.
Yeah. All right. So we keep access to your data at a minimum, and you'll find that pretty well all law firms do. For example, if you're talking about a uptown law firm in Toronto, who's got 1,000 lawyers and 300 paralegals working for them, you can bet that none of those people know anything about files outside of their division.
Right. Because sometimes you'll go into a larger firm, they have the employment law division, personal injury division, real estate.
And you won't know, and you wouldn't know a thing about, about mergers and acquisitions or, or defamation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because
sometimes each department is headed by a partner, sometimes a senior associate, depending on the type of firm it is.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole point about that is that those, again, in those firms, they limit who can see stuff. But in fact, actually, the lawyer or paralegal that works for such a firm actually also has the duty to inform on the firm. So you're at a firm meeting and they're talking about a new client coming on, a group meeting in that firm, talking about a new client coming on. And this is Mr. Charles Lee, that Angela knows very well. And Angela's kind of got to put her hand up and say, I'm sorry, my new employer. I can't do anything with that with Mr. Lee because I was up against him at a former person.
Because Charles Lee was a former client, and now this firm is actually suing Charles Lee.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I have to put a Chinese wall up.
Yeah. They can continue to sue Charles Lee, but you're never permitted to see a
I
file.
don't know anything about it. I do not talk about it.
Yep.
If there is a meeting with people to talk about this issue, I'm not part of it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Even if you're in the right group, even if you're in the group that would normally handle that particular matter. So when it comes down to those kinds of meetings, for example, where people are discussing what's going on in a file, that's the point of dealing with, Smith versus Charles Lee. And Angela says, you'll excuse me and just let me know when I can come back in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how it would happen.
Unfortunately, Invictus is not a huge, large firm, so we're able to pretty well rule out conflicts pretty quickly.
But again, we've had one or two conflicts.
We've had to decline work.
Yeah. We've had one or two conflicts, and generally speaking, when there's such a conflict, usually you read them out early. When there is such a conflict, you tend to say, okay, well,
and you have to go through the whole thing. If there's something that changes or new defendants added or something else has to be strategically added, you have to go back and check the conflicts again to make sure that not new one doesn't arise.
Yep, absolutely. And you're supposed to check them at each stage of the as you manage the file. Okay, so here's a question. Therefore, also, what are the rules about how a member of staff works on your data?
When they're in the office, they use the computer to go in, and they can put stuff into their files. We have a drive that all files are preserved and put onto the drive. It's listed under their name, so they can go in there, and you have to get into this because you actually have to have a password to get into these computers. Hey, so not just somebody walking into our office is curious and let's see what's on these computers. Hey, and it just opens up like the partners know the passwords, but the person who works in the office only knows theirs. To get in, and that they can go in and look at their files. They work on them. And if there's issues, to come back, talk to partners, talk to others, and try to get things organized in a way. And then we need to update periodically, because we need to know what your work is. And sometimes people say, well, how come you don't let a lot of people work regularly at home? Well, remote work is not exactly something that works well within the way we do things in our office. Although we've let people work at home sometimes, and when they had to, like if they were like say if they're going somewhere or if they're looking after their kids or doing something where they had to, but they can't take this stuff on a personal computer.
Yeah,
they have to go to the cloud only.
Yeah, I think the last time I worked at home was because we were getting a delivery, like a washing machine or something like that.
Yeah, something came in that didn't work before, but something else worked. Yeah. So I mean, these are things that and you go through a cloud, and once you're done to cloud, you just save it back on the cloud, and that way, after you finish working on it, and then you can come back and work. You can open the cloud again, and you can see it, right? What you worked on at home. So we do not allow people, because what happens is if you start putting your data on, like sometimes people want to email the data so they can work on it at home, and then they work on it at home. Then what happens is they're if they ever leave the firm or even go somewhere else or even start their own office, that data is still on their personal computer, and that data is not theirs.
Well, the good thing about
because all we have to do is shut off cloud access when someone leaves.
Yeah, exactly. And the typical sort of thing that you might well be talking about, I can't show it. Doesn't give. I was going to say it's like pulling the wire out of your computer, right?
Yeah.
Because you've turned off the switch to your computer still works exactly as it was.
Mm-hmm.
but you're missing a section of it because that section that was the cloud, the confidential cloud no longer exists.
And then also too, once you leave, you should no longer have access to your personal data. If you should actually come to your email, accidentally get back into your personal email when you're no longer on the staff, if you manage to get into it, that's illegal. That's illegal.
Yeah.
Right? And it's there's some pretty strict penalties on stuff like that. Because the thing is, all of this stuff is still confidential, and you're not supposed to do this. The only time that you can take some information about a client is if that client informs the firm that I've worked really well with Joe over here, and I know Joe's going to Smith and Jones over there, and I would like to just move my file transfer over there. There's a step that you have to take within the Law Society. Where a client would transfer over with the former associate to the new firm. And they can do that, but it has to go through a process. And when we have associates leave firms, we do meet with the clients and give them that option. And they tell us basically, usually they want to stay with us, but I've had issues. I didn't have any issues a couple of times where somebody would say, I prefer to work with Jack or whatever. And just, can you give me my file? So what I do is I arrange for them for a time for pickup. And I also have them sign a paperwork that they had received everything, right? And that they take the file over to Jack Jones.
And just to be also clear in that scenario is that what the client doesn't get back is any work product from the firm. So anything that Invictus does, they don't get that. But it's possible that if if Jack Jones was going with Charles as Charles moved to another firm, Charles may already have personal notes on that file anyway.
Yeah, and then Charles is fine to use them, right? Because that's with the same client.
Yeah.
Right? And that the client is cleared, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So these are things that are very important. And if this is not done, you can't just take the data and then use it yourself. Nor can you take the data and then attempt to try to profit from it in some way by trying to solicit them or even just leaving it on your computer, right? Even if you don't do anything with it, which is usually the case. I know that, But the other situation too that's often encountered is sometimes your personal computer is a shared computer at home. Maybe you share it with your spouse, maybe a kid who does homework on your computer, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Things could be a problem if you have a laptop or a PC at home that operates as the family PC, which is another reason why you do not have client data on that PC.
But can you imagine the scenario? Your 11-year-old son comes running by and says, "Yeah, I know all about yada yada." Right? I know all about this person. I'm going to tell everybody in the world how bad yada yada is, right? And you're kind of going red in the face as you kind of go, well, this is my client, and where the hell did he get all this information from?
Yep, because that could be pretty serious. And the thing that a lot of people don't always get is that if your legal services provider is married, even the spouse doesn't get to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's an interesting thing because in England, I met a barrister who was the woman was a prosecutor, and her husband was actually a defense barrister, and she basically was up against him all the time.
And they argue at the dinner table.
But they never talk about their cases at home. Ever, right? Never.
Yeah,
ever.
well, they can't talk about it, that way.
Yeah.
They can only do it with your work function.
They might know, that she knows that she's operating for the Crown, and that he's doing the Jack Jones case.
Yeah.
She might be saying, yeah, I'm gonna put Jonesy away for 15 years. She might argue like that, a bit of husband and wife banter that way. And his return, might well be, no, he's going away, and he's not going to serve a moment's time, and he's going to sue you for $15 million.
Yeah.
And it's banter. It's got nothing to do with the case in mind, because neither of, all of them are just, they're just playing games, right?
Yeah.
Right. They're not seriously looking at your case. They just know that one another is on that particular case, right? Okay, so let us recap for everybody. We're talking about client confidentiality and privacy, particularly digital data privacy, all right? And the funny thing is, it's not just in the legal world. Pretty well, if you were to walk into pretty well any business, you'd find that data privacy is quite an important subject, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. If you're working for CRA, you cannot go home and tell your wife everything about somebody's tax return you just audited.
Yeah. I just audited Joe Blow's tax return, and he owes $15 million. Yeah, that's the thing you cannot do.
These things you just keep quiet. Yeah. Like I've been in practice long enough, and my family doesn't know any specifics about any of the cases that I've ever taken on.
And the thing is, around the office, we might laugh about a particular situation or educate somebody about a particular situation in the future that we've come across today, but we don't talk specifics.
Yeah, can't. You have to be very, very careful with it. And this is why I've always said, well, people who start working alone, they try to develop a peer group, because because sometimes you come up with some pretty dreadful things.
Yeah.
Okay? And when you develop a peer group, at least you could talk about some of the stresses and some of the issues that you're encountering, even though you can't talk about your cases, but you can talk about some of the stresses that your cases cause you. Oh, I just had this client walk into the office, and he was waving his hands around and demanding $20,000 from us and yelling at us, like you're not talking about his case, but you're talking about somebody's behavior. Somebody's nutty behavior that's driving you up the wall.
Yeah, and like the guy who walked in one day and emptied his pills on the boardroom table and demanded his money back.
Yeah, people like that is, and it happens in every office.
Yeah.
Even other types of work like psychotherapy, medical doctors, accountants, like.
Well, we probably had less of the nutcases in the IT world, but you still had some. You'd still have, like, the accountant would walk in and say, we've been asking for this accountant to give us some data for months and months and months. He'd say, yeah, tomorrow, mañana, mañana. And then today he walks in and says, I need my data now. Yeah. You haven't given us anything for the last 12 months. I can show you every single email I've sent you in the last 15 months. Do you think I can do anything when you haven't given me what I need, what I've been asking for?
Mm-hmm.
But I need it now. Yeah, sorry, you might need it now.
Yeah.
Right. But if you if you don't give me what I need, I can't calculate what you need. Right. That's about working together, right? It's about building relationships and actually turning around. There's a confidentiality thing there as well, but there's a lot of interaction that needs to go on in any business, right?
Yep. And it's just where you have to work. So your company needs to set policies. Like if you're running a paralegal or a lawyer firm, or even another firm where you require strict confidentiality, you need to have strict policies.
Yeah.
Okay? people who are running out of home, they better have a home office that's separate and apart from the rest of the house. Because especially if they have to call people on the phone and talk to them, your spouse can't hear the other half, your half of the conversation.
Be even weirder if she was on the other half of the conversation.
Pick up the other line. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Yeah. All joking aside, data privacy is actually very vital and very important. So here's kind of one of the final questions of the day. Where do we store your data?
Store them in, there's file cabinets that could be locked. Peter's office, he keeps his files in Peter's office, and he locks the door. So basically, so that just in case he's not in the office, like we weren't in the office for a good part of the day, but we kept our doors locked because, well, mostly Peter keeps it locked because of confidential files that he maintains. And you don't know who comes in.
But this one's going to Mary next week, right?
Yep.
Right. Well, and then of course they've got this other one for Charles out here.
Yep. So these are all starting to do that. And me, I keep things there. Like there's other information I keep, like within the management of the office and the finances, other people, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but again, when we're talking about data privacy, right? So data, we're talking also largely about digital. So this is where secure clouds come into play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is where you have to have a password protected cloud. Right. Yeah. And if people leave, the password changes or they get locked out.
Yeah.
Right? So this is why you have to have that. You get locked out of their email, they get locked out of the cloud, as well as any kind of instrument that we might use. And so people would have to work with a security, like an IT person who knows a little bit about security to try to set your place up so that they can have a big switch, sort of like by Adam Beck's station, for example. Shut off, power up.
Well, yeah, but again, the thing about cloud security is probably every law firm has it.
Yep.
What tools they actually use. Well, we're not going to disclose to you what tools we use. We just know, we can't disclose that. And no other firm will disclose that either, typically.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And these are between you and your IT people that advise you.
Exactly. And it's up to our IT people who will actually regularly review how we secure our data. And
there could be a way you can set up your server, the way you could set up your computer systems, your networks. There's lots of ways to make sure. And there's also lots of ways, like if your company's a type that would provide your employee with a laptop, or if they use your own, you can actually ask them to install a particular type of software in it so that you can monitor activity as well. Yeah. So there's different things like that go on.
Yeah, and of course, there's every firm. If you went for a walk into any firm within a mile and a half of we're here, they probably all have keyloggers and secure software that would mean that if you're an employee in any one of these firms around here, there's secure security in place. There's protection in place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's lots of reasons for that. They just want to make sure that what you're using, that you're using it for the purposes of your employment or for the contract that you're working on.
Well, the irony here is we were talking about one of the big changes that happened during the course of COVID is that a lot of employers actually sent their employees home. And what were they doing at home? They were sitting on this screen doing their work, and then they're sitting on this screen chatting on Facebook.
Yep.
Copy paste. Yeah.
Yeah, and where the minutes are kept and the hours are lost.
Yeah. Okay, and of course, security is a big breach in that potential situation, right? Okay, so breach of privacy is an important issue to consider because, first of all, okay, what is this? What's a basic understanding of a breach of privacy, right?
Yep. You're out of the firm. You got a new job somewhere else. That's fine. That's great. You cannot go back into your old email. If you have data that you've taken down onto your personal computer, you have to delete it.
Yeah.
You cannot keep it. Right? Even if you're just not doing anything with it, it doesn't matter. It's still not your data.
And again, if you happen to be a former employee, and it's not just law firms, if you happen to be a former employee of any firm, and you suddenly find, and you're suddenly innocently browsing through your computer, click, click, click. Oh, that files shouldn't be here. Well, you should first of all return it to whoever it belongs to, with an assurance to them that you've just discovered it, and that you are actually deleting it at this point.
Yeah. I had to do that one time. Somebody sent me a file from the government, from the Ontario government of all places. The file did not belong to me. I had no idea who it was. So what I did is I just took it, I got the address, and I returned it to them, saying that this was a mistake. It was sent in error. Because there were some issues on there that had it gotten out beyond me, there could have been some implications for some people.
Yeah. And let's be honest, even though on the bottom of your email, it says a number of things. Typically, most lawyers and paralegals will say that this has been sent for specific purposes to a specific individual in the course of legal work. And if it is sent to you by mistake, then please delete it, and please inform us and delete it.
I've had a couple people do that where I might have accidentally sent it to somebody, and then somebody calls.
You sent it to John Smith, and you got the wrong John Smith off your list.
Yeah.
It happened.
Like I always tease Peter, because I always say, I says, when you're sending emails, make sure when you send an email to Mary, that you're addressing Mary, and don't get her confused with Veronica. Especially when you send your love letters out.
How can I get her confused with Veronica? Mary looks entirely different than Veronica. You would never
applies everywhere. That applies everywhere. Not
Mary with Veronica.
But it applies everywhere. Just to be very careful who you're sending it to, that they are authorized to receive it.
Well, I think the more important one is when you've got the common names like an Adam Smith or a Joey Jones or something like that, is that you get the wrong Joey Jones.
Yeah.
Right. You select the one that is in, that is working for IBM rather than the one that's your client.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be very careful. Like, look at it. What's the email address? What's the email address on file? And just make sure that it follows all of your prior correspondence.
So that's what you would call an innocent breach of privacy, because nobody meant it to happen.
Yeah. I had a couple times I did that. I faxed something out to the wrong people. Another time I sent some email out and went to the wrong person, and the people at the other end called. And they informed me that I did, and then of course I discovered. I said okay, and they said, okay, do you want me to destroy this? I said absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the point when you start looking at your Outlook calendar and you go, how the hell did I send it to them?
Yep. But it doesn't happen that often because because most of us, like, we have to be very, very careful here.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been talking here about what we might term as innocent breach of privacy, right? Typically, I think most people will delete that file upon request and will actually not be chatting about it, right? They might laugh about the fact that you sent the file over to them, but once the joke's out and gone, hey, who cares, right?
Yep.
And
It's done and done.
Yeah, it's done and dusted, exactly. But then when you've got is actually a more serious breach of privacy where somebody has actually broken into a system.
Yep. Like there's hackers out there,
Yeah,
who just love to break into systems. People heard about the CRA, they hear about the hospitals, they hear about the Board of Education, they hear about life labs, all of these things. These are very serious. Those are usually created by hackers, or it could be even an internal job where someone just takes them all the data, puts it on a stick. Maybe they intended to do something with it that was proper, but somehow the stick got lost, and then the stick later gets found by the wrong person. So things like that could happen.
yeah.
So we always hear about these things once in a while, and people have, like employers, businesses, they have to have some kind of policy to try to prevent that.
Yeah.
But however, it can happen. Sometimes people will deliberately breach.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
they'll deliberately steal data. They'll steal files, and you have to, and that can have repercussions. There could be a lawsuit. There could be a complaint to PIPEDA, Privacy Commissioner, depending on where the file is being stolen from.
Yeah. And I was just going to say that was kind of my next question was what will a law firm do about it?
Yep.
So you've covered some of these. Yeah.
According to their policies, and also they need to inform if a client is involved or there's something done with that.
Well,
you need to inform your people that may potentially have their data breached, and also you need to deal with the person who breached it, which
okay.
could involve a lawsuit, firing them. There's a number of things that could be done. And also there are specific institutions. PIPEDA, it also covers private sector agencies. So if somebody is breaching privacy, hacking into your computer, or joining your firm and then taking stuff out of the computer, that's definitely against the law. Okay? There are legal things, cyber type of legal stuff that some people are able to do. And some of it's pretty simple to do, some of it's more complicated to do. But the thing is, there are legal repercussions for doing it. People can get sued, and in some severe cases, there could be criminal charges filed.
And there are two types of remedies here. Ultimately, there's security, what a data security person might well do to recover from the breach, but then there's legal remedies available as well in any of these situations. And sometimes that might even be it might even arise to the level of criminal criminal
in a severe case, for example, like say if it's a healthcare facility that you're in, and then somebody who is one of your employees decides that they're going to go and take specific information about healthcare, and then go out and maybe start selling them products or life insurance or naturopathic medicine or something like that after, and using that information from the facility that they work in. That something like that happened a little while ago, and there were pretty serious repercussions.
Yeah.
And then someone else. Yeah.
Okay, so most organizations have policies for data protection, and they're there with good reason.
Yep.
Right? And we've covered
avoiding spam, avoiding particular types of scammers online. Do not click links that you're not sure of. I had a thing calling me today, which was legitimate from my bank, but I just said I have to hang up, and I called the bank myself. And then I found out that yes, indeed, there was cause for that call.
Yeah.
Okay? Because otherwise, how do I know it's not somebody from Nigeria calling us? I'm
Well,
not pressing a bunch of buttons and letting somebody have access to my accounts.
especially if the caller happens to have an accent anyway, and not picking on Nigerians or
Yeah.
and would you know a Nigerian accent if you
No.
heard
I
it?
know
You
a British
probably wouldn't.
accent. I
Yeah.
know a British accent.
But the point being is that you're doing what you can to protect your data.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So that's one of the things, and then other things too, having strict confidentiality where people sign things.
yeah,
Right? They sign paperwork where they have to promise that they're going to adhere to that, and you keep company policies that people are kept up to date from time to time, and that any kind of breach of company policies would result in repercussions. There are different things if you have a computer system and security, depending on what type of system you have. If people are allowed to go work elsewhere, work at home, you need to be very, very careful with them, have a very secure. We talked about that yesterday about having a computer where you don't keep any data on file, but you just have the operating system.
in fact, actually, there are many companies whereby you get a computer that has a hard drive that is just about big enough to load up the operating system
So
and
have your
manage
RAM,
the operating
have your
system.
RAM.
That's it, right? The RAM and the
Yeah, and anything that you go in when you go into the cloud, it's it opens up to the cloud. You have a password, which you have to do it, and you have to do a multifactorial verification, okay, to get into your password to and get into the cloud, and then you have access, and you're able to work there. But once you're in the cloud, I know that people at computer 195, okay, they're working, they're doing this thing or that, and people on computer 163, they're doing that. So there's ways of monitoring.
yeah. And pretty well every company out there, whether a law firm or anything else, will have common policies for data protection.
Yeah.
They'll have rules about how they deal with data protection. And as you said, they can monitor, they have the right to monitor how data is being used within.
And if you have more than 25 employees and you are monitoring, you have to inform your employees that you are monitoring them and also how you're monitoring them.
Yeah.
People have a right to know that. You can't secretly monitor them.
Yeah. The other thing to know about here is there are law society rules when it comes to lawyers and paralegal.
Yep. Yep. It's about keeping data secure, keeping passwords, and about how information, if you are working at home or in a what do you call a work center where you're working with other people, okay, and that your information doesn't become outside of between yourself and your client.
Well, and the other thing about this, ironically, is the person appearing here over the shoulder needs to be validated and being able to talk. We had the kangaroo here in this seat last week, right? You don't want somebody hanging over your shoulder being able to look at the file that's here, that is got client confidential information. And in many instances, in fact, law firms, this applies to law firms, but basically, if you walk away to go get a coffee, if you're a lawyer, paralegal, and you walk away to go to get a coffee, no, I'm not saying you close the system down, but you minimize the screens.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody walks into your office while you're not there, they're not reading your file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you just have to keep everything that way. So there's a lot of things that you have to protect and limit who gets to see them.
And the Law Society has these rules for a very good reason.
Very good reason, because they don't dictate exactly how you do it, but they do say that you have to have your data protection, passwords, various things.
Yeah.
And they do talk about confidentiality, who gets to know the information and who doesn't.
Yeah.
It's very important that this stuff is well known.
Yeah.
And they also have rules for what happens when someone leaves your company. Hey, I like confidentiality with clients is there until the day that the client dies, even after they die.
Yeah.
So these things like that, a lot of people don't realize this stuff and how tough it is, hey, to deal with this.
Oh yeah, and having a couple of dead clients, your essential responsibility now moves from the person who's died to the estate.
Yeah, to the estate. And if family members have to continue, like say for example, carrying on a litigation, for example, that might have started before the person died.
Yeah,
Hey, so there's a lot of that.
or
So
closing out files and things like that.
yeah, so they have to go for an appointment through the
Yeah,
court, come back, and then they become the estate guardian, and they advise you as to the litigation, the
yeah,
trust of the will. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we've run through that, and hopefully that plus what we did last week helps people understand about privacy and client confidentiality. And I think that that's kind of a reasonable lesson. We've still got upcoming a second part of a
Environmental.
environmental one, and I also want to talk about garnishment at some point in the near future.
Yep, we'll talk about garnishment. And
All
I
right.
think at some point we need to talk about election laws
Yeah. Okay.
because we've been having so many of them lately.
So many of them. It should be. Here's election act rule section 1 brackets 1A. There shall not be an election when there's a storm on.
Yeah, should not be an election called for a blizzard.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, joking aside, thank you everybody for being here. If you need to contact Invictus Legal, you can do so on 905-688-5598. Or email Angela at angela@weareinvictus.legal or myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal, or go look at the website weareinvictus.legal. Okay. So that then leaves me to kind of thank everybody and give the table over to Angela.
Okay, so what you heard today on Spin Legal in this show or any others in our series is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, please contact a paralegal or a lawyer. Hey, we'd like you to come to us, but do go to a paralegal or a lawyer. Hey, before you try to act on your own or whatever. Okay?
And with that, I think we can say thank you and have a great week.
Okay.